Hi, everybody. It's Alex Jarett with Technology Executives Club, and welcome to Technology Executives Review. That's our podcast. It's our video show and podcast. And again, that's me, your host and founder of Technology Executives Club and Technology Executives Review, which is what we call our digital media footprint. And it's brought to you by the club, our business club, Technology Executives Club. And you can watch all, if you like this video or podcast, you can watch all of our videos at technologyexecutivesclub.com. We just opened up a new YouTube channel, and we're going to be putting everything that's on our site on there too. So wherever you're happier. And of course, we've got our podcast. It's under the name Technology Executives Review on Apple and Spotify, and you can get there from our site as well. Now, today we got a really interesting topic. It's the end of the year when we're recording this. And as many of you know, sometimes the end of the year is when you start looking for your next gig, because that's when companies make changes. And the young man that's on the camera next to me is Tom Welke, and he came up with this topic. I'll introduce Tom in a second. Keys to landing your next IT leadership job. And again, we all know we've all been there. For me, it was many years ago, but we've all been there where things change in the corporate world, things can change very quickly. Sometimes, Tom, it has nothing to do with your performance. It's just, they're making changes. And so let me introduce you formally. This is Tom Welke. He's a partner at RSM Solutions, one of our board of advisors members. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Doing okay. Thanks
Good.
for hosting this.
Happy to have you. This is a great topic. And I always got to remind myself where you live. You live near Minnesota, right on the border between Wisconsin and Minnesota. Is that right?
That's right.
Right on the border.
That's right. That's right. So if you were to land in St. Paul, I'm about a 40-minute drive east of St. Paul.
That's right. And Tom and I have known each other now for, I'd say, a long time now. And I first met Tom. He's got this concept called karma, spreading karma. And Tom is really the guy when it comes to spreading karma. Your practice that you run is all about helping people with their careers, and you actually are a recruiter, right, for the firms, for the companies, and you do staffing, staff augmentation, direct hire, and contract hire, I imagine, as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. So a mix of all of that. So perm, contract to hire, and contract.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're exactly right.
And you specialize in the technology industry, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right. Anyways, Tom's a great guy. If you see him online, connect with him, or just go ahead and connect with him. Go to you're watching this probably on our site. If not, go to technologyexecutivesclub.com, go to his page, and you can connect with him. There's a link there, or just visit him on LinkedIn. Now, you came up with this topic. You did another session with us that was hiring in the age of AI. By the way, if you haven't watched that or listened to that, look it up. And that was a great segment, Tom.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you came up with that. I think you said that people were coming to you and really enjoyed that segment. I know people were coming to me, and we both put our heads together and said, "What's next?" And you came back and said, "Why don't we help people get their next job?" So we've helped people hire. Why don't we go on the other side of the coin and help people get the next job, right?
That's correct. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So this is called Lessons from Tom. So tell me, I put down Lessons from Tom and Other Leaders. Tell me about how you created this content that we're about to walk through.
Thanks a lot, Alex. So through that karma that I kind of continue to spread, I've created some really solid friendships and really true, honest to goodness friendships with chief information officers, CISOs, directors of IT, directors of apps, directors of infrastructure. And one of the things that I learned over this past year in particular is that the job market is kind of tough. So, Alex, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I interviewed some of those chief information officers, directors, and so on and so forth that have been in their search this year, struggle and learn what are some of the struggles that they've had? What are some things that they found that were successful? And I thought, rather than just putting together a survey with 4 answers for each question, I carved out anywhere between a half hour to an hour with about a dozen director, VP, and C-level executives to get their honest to goodness feedback in terms of what's worked, what hasn't, if they got laid off today, what they do differently than perhaps what they did in their search this year. And that's where I came up with the content that we'll talk about here today.
Okay. So let me summarize that. So basically, to net it out, you helped people during the last year or two, and you went back to these people which you knew had been in the job market recently and got great jobs. And you said, what are your tips? Basically, you asked the questions. So this is all fresh material is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. These interviews were done within the last 2 weeks.
Oh, of time we're doing this. And we're recording this at the end of the year 2024. So it's right around the holiday season, just started the holiday season. In fact, we're recording this the day before Thanksgiving. So Tom, we're grateful for you doing this for everybody. And so let's get into it. So the first quote you got is discipline will take you where your motivation won't. Now, I tried to look this quote up, and there's a lot of people that get credit for this quote. It's actually the original quote that I see is discipline won't take you where discipline will take you where your motivation can't. That's the one that kept coming up on the internet. So tell me where you got this. Tell us what you're talking about here.
Sure. So there's a friend of mine named Gustavo, who's one of my closest friends. He said, basically this quote is that gotta have discipline. So to that point, Alex, between Gustavo and gentlemen like Mike Casey, there's a few other gentlemen like Steve and so on and so forth that basically said, look at your search kind of like a marketer looks at how they market to their target market, or how a salesperson sells to their market. And what he said basically is think about what is your target market? What is that target market buying? How do you know they're buying? Create your message, know that it resonates. But that's the first part of this discipline concept of figure out the number of calls you're going to make per week. Don't relax that. Figure out who you're going to target and consistently target that. Another thing that came up is just like a professional marketer or a professional salesperson, you use various tools to track your activities. Excel can do this, but things like Jibber Jabber, Suite CRM, Obsidian, Notion, other CRM tools are going to be really, really important for you to track your activities. And one of the things that, again, that discipline, by tracking your activities, your emotional piece of your search takes off too, because you can see you can track your progress. One of the things that one of the gentlemen said, I use these tools to keep myself on track, because if you don't, you start to lose yourself in your search, and you start going through, okay, did I apply for this one? What was the job that I applied to? Use the intelligence that you gain through your search in these tools. By track your activities, monitor your metrics, just like when you were managing a team, you had KPIs and metrics that you tracked your team with. Do the same thing with your search. And oh, by the way, hope is not a KPI. So that's something that I've heard as well. So it's really, really important to attack your search just as a marketer attacks their market that they're targeting, just as a salesperson attacks their market that they're targeting too. One of the keys that I learned also is my friend John Baird mentioned, he even got himself an office outside of his home that he went to every day. It was, and just like one of my friends Boris mentioned this too, is that you have to treat your job search as a job. And most people, I think by now, that are in the midst of their search realize that, but it'll be, okay, I treat it as a job. But then ask yourself, what tools are you using, just like you would in your normal job, to help track those activities? So that's where that discipline comes in.
Okay. So you're saying a lot there. So let me break it down. It's really not just discipline. You're saying treat it like a job, create a framework for the search. So create it like a job, create a framework, use the tools in that framework. And the discipline is then when you build that system or framework, work the system and be consistent in working the system. That's what you're saying, correct?
Exactly. That
Yeah.
consistency, just like you said, Alex, that consistency, that's the key, because that's where things get, when you get lost in your search,
Yeah.
sometimes you lose that consistency. So, like one of my other friends said, if you commit to making 15 new contacts a week,
That's a lot.
don't leave your desk on Friday until you've made those 15. Don't relax your principles.
All right. So 15 calls a week, this is part of, like you said, I think the analogy to sales is pretty good, but probably most CIOs, I think they probably get that because most companies, the CIO is helping with Salesforce or whatever. And it really is like a sales or marketing role, or even a customer success or customer service role, where you have, like you said, KPIs that you create for yourself and you say, okay, it's a job. I'm going to create this framework. And part of that framework is, you said 15 as an example, 15 contacts or reach out to 15 people a week. And I think you mean not quick little short connects, but real connects, real where you're really spending a minute sending a nice, thoughtful email or LinkedIn note. I'm guessing, is that right? Because 15, you could do 50, you could blow through 15 in an hour if you did it quickly. But that's
Yeah.
not what you're saying. You're saying something substantive, right?
Exactly. This leads to another point we'll be talking about today, and that networking isn't a one call close. But one of the things that's kind of interesting is you mentioned, just in mentioning that, it reminded me of something that my buddy Gustavo said, is that if you make a commitment, just like a salesperson does or a marketing person says, I'm going to make 15 new contacts in a week. You don't leave your desk until you've done that on Friday. But you plan your work your plan your work, just like a salesperson does. But one of the things he mentioned is, in your first couple weeks after you lose your job, you're gonna have lots of people say, "Oh, you're gonna be fine, no problem. You're gonna do just great." So he says those first couple weeks, you leave thinking, "Oh, this will be a snap," right? So maybe you relax your plan because you're like, I got nothing to worry about, right? After that second week,
here's the bad news, everybody.
Here's the people that respond to you, and that is where, like the original thing we talked about, you got to make sure you have a plan, work your plan and plan your work, because after that first couple weeks, you start reaching out to people, they're not going to call you back. So that you start thinking, oh man, I should have started really build. Yeah, I should have started day one, like the day after I lost my gig.
Well, let me help you with this, because I'm going to say I know people just like you do that are in our community, and there are some people. I'm going to mention Tom Dres from Christian Brothers. He's retired now, but he consciously developed relationships throughout his career. I guarantee if he was in this situation, he'd have a dozen people ready to help him. So the thing is, I think in your notes you were saying you have to invest in people first.
Right.
So if you're just watching this, you haven't lost your job yet, make a point to invest in your network. But if you are in that position, I don't think, Tom, you're just saying they won't call you back, but they may not call you back because now all of a sudden, guess what? You're not the CIO of such and such anymore, and you never gave them a moment of your time that wasn't transactional. So I think that's a key message right now, and you're the master of this, which is the whole thing about karma. But okay, fast forward to the guy or lady who, okay, everybody said, don't worry, you'll be fine. I guess what you're saying is, don't buy it. Your friend Gustav is saying, don't buy it. Get to work immediately, right?
Right. That's exactly right. Like my friend Mike Casey said, your job search starts the day after you lose your job. And don't relax from that.
That makes sense.
That's been kind of an interesting point, is don't think that, everything's going to be fine, because until you land that next gig, you've lost control. So one of the interesting points too that I learned is when you lose your gig, you kind of lose control, right?
What do you mean?
Maybe had a staff of 15 that reported to you, or 5 or 3 or what have you. You had vendors at your beck and call. They always called you back. You always had, when you have a $20 million budget, you have a lot of friends. And when you have no budget, you really figure out who your friends are. But in that process, one of the important things is to find something you can control, something that you can get something out of. Like maybe you take your dog for a walk every morning. Maybe you exercise for an hour a day and you make a commitment to yourself, something that you're getting something out of. And that'll help you with your with the emotional aspect of your search as well. So, and that becomes really important because guess what? You know this, Alex. People can smell fear. If you feel like you're desperate, guess what? Other people are going to sense that too. Mm-hmm. And no one hires a desperate guy.
Mm-hmm. Or a lady.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. All right. Anything else on this slide? You had some other notes, Peter. Is that it for this slide? I'll edit this part out.
Oh, just one other thing. In your search, you may be applicant 4001. This doesn't mean you don't have a chance. One of the things I've learned is
good point.
Don't just take rejection sitting down. Write a rebuttal. One of my friends.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
Exactly. So this has been really fascinating.
Okay,
so
let's hear
just
this.
Because someone rejects you, don't take it laying down. If you think that you're a good fit, write a rebuttal. Say, hey, I think you might have misread my candidacy. Here's why I think it'd be a good fit. This is where your network really pays dividends. So one of my friends did this, and lo and behold, he's now in like the third round of interview with a company that originally rejected him because he had a really good, solid network. He got in touch with the CIO of this company through a mutual friend and said, I think I could be a really good fit for this role, and here's why. So he wrote a rebuttal with 2 or 3 bullet points of here's why I think I'd be a good fit. And even though the HR system rejected him, he's now in the third round of interview for that particular job.
Yeah,
so don't assume that, I got a rejection, got to move on. No.
That's a really good point. In our last video, we were talking from the other side. We were talking about what are the systems that are the automatic resume reading systems. What are they called again? The
ATS.
The ATS. I think it's important for people to know that the environment that they're going through is when they're submitting their resumes online, automation is sometimes making the yes or no decision for the first pass. Is that correct, Tom?
That's exactly correct.
So, just because you got denied up front for a job you really want doesn't necessarily mean it's over if you can rebut it. But it almost lends itself to me asking, should they, if they have the opportunity, how do you work? Okay, I made my submission, but then I also have contacts in the company. Should they go to the contacts in the company first and say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for this job. Do you think you get me into a meeting? Or should they apply and then do that? Or it depends on the situation? How would you advise them, Tom?
I say it depends on the situation,
mm-hmm.
but your network is what's really going to pay the greatest dividends. And again, this goes to one of the things you brought up, Alex, which is very apropos, in that the power of your network depends on what you put into it.
Uh-huh.
So if you reach out to somebody you've talked to once and say, hey, could you introduce me to Bob Smith? They're going to say, I guess I could, but I don't really have a lot to talk to Bob Smith about you.
Yeah.
So that goes back to, that real importance of building that network, because if that network is strong, definitely the connection to that person through LinkedIn or through a mutual contact is going to pay bigger dividends.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's keep moving. You made a point, and I talk about this usually when people come to me, maybe they are thinking about they're proactively thinking about their next career job, or they want to, maybe they just got the big job and they want to really build their brand up. And then, of course, we also have providers like yourself, consultants that are looking just to provide thought leadership and get the word out so you can grow your business, right? As you're sharing, but you're also looking to build your brand and help grow your business. So I get people sort of in that, but you're saying here to make sure that your executive brand, I think LinkedIn probably, or any other social media, aligns with the brand on your resume. Is that right?
That's exactly right. it's becoming really important in a sea of hundreds and hundreds of applicants per role to build your brand. What do you do differently?
Mm-hmm.
What value do you bring to the table that the other 30 director of application development candidates don't bring?
Mm-hmm.
One of the concepts that I learned from Rick, as well as a whole host of other CIOs, is that you are not CIO is not your brand.
Interesting.
CIO is not your brand. Your brand is, I bring e-commerce to the table. I bring e-commerce to life, or I make your ERP implementations sorrows go away,
Mm-hmm.
or I manage projects to success in a massive scale. That's your brand. That's what you do differently. Your brand isn't CIO or Director of Application Development.
I would
Your
agree
brand
with
is
that.
what makes
Yeah.
you different than everybody else that's applying for the roles that you're applying to.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to hone that brand. And interestingly enough, you bring up a fascinating concept here, Alex, is that your brand, interestingly enough, is going to come from your network, because your network is going to know you far better than sometimes you know yourself, because they're going to know what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to know what you're not good at. So in your search, my friend Rick mentioned this a few times, and my friend Sargon Guliana. Sargon is the president of a company called Cuneiform. That's another thing we'll talk about here, in that he started his own gig. They focus on digital transformation for small and mid-market companies. But one of the things that they said, both of them said, is remember, have that person in your network. Let's say it's a friend, somebody that has no fiduciary interest in your success, that can tell you, hey, you're not good at this. You may think you are, but in order to be good at this, you're going to need this, 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 and this. And you don't have those. Somebody that can be brutally honest with you in terms of saying, here's what you're good at. Here's what you're not. Here's what your assumptions are in terms of what you're good at. Your assumptions are wrong. So that goes again to having your network help you build your brand, so you don't have blind spots. You may come to the table saying, hey, I'm an e-commerce guru, but your network says, no, you're not. So it becomes really important to almost have your network help you build that brand.
That's interesting. As a counter to that, I know a person we interviewed. I interviewed Anaf Durrani, who's the VP of engineering, and he's exceptional. He's very talented. And when I interviewed him, he said that he consistently would go after jobs that he hadn't done before. I think it's a little different than what you're saying, because he felt the confidence with his engineering background and everything else that he could get the job done. So if you look at people like that, they jump. But I think for most people, I think your advice holds a lot of wisdom, is to where is your focus and what do you excel at? So when I coach, and we'll talk about this at the end, I typically get people that, I get a lot of people reach out to me that are looking for jobs, of course, and I'm happy to, if you're watching this, I'm happy to help you and connect you to a bunch of people. But really, when I get people that join our Board of Advisor program like you have, they're actually thinking proactively forward. And one piece of advice I'll talk about in a minute is I tell them to think about what is their niche, what is their brand. I'll give you a little more tips on that in a minute. But I think you're right on the money with that. All right, so let's keep moving. And your next thing is networking is not a one-call close. And what do you mean by that?
Thanks for the question there, Alex. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I just had I'll make a 20-minute conversation to have a networking call," and then they think, "Oh, I'm done." No. Most of my relationships with, like, my friend Jason, Sanjeev Hans, John Baird, Gustavo, Henrik, have been built over time. It's a 20-minute call here. It's a check-in 2 or 3 months later saying, "So, how you doing?" It's like with my friend Boris. He and I are friends.
Yeah.
And became friends over time, not because of what I could do for him, but what I can help him with. So one of the interesting concepts here is, if you are not getting a lot out of your network, and you'll hear this sometimes. People say, I'm going through networking, but I'm not getting a lot out of it. Guess what? You aren't getting enough out of your network because you aren't giving enough. It's one of the comments my friend Jason said.
That's a great quote. Say that again. I like that one.
You aren't getting enough out of your network because you aren't giving enough. This is an interesting point. By sending an email back, like when I make introductions, so I'll do this. You've seen me do this, Alex, where I'll introduce one CIO to another.
Yeah.
Maybe they're looking for work or they're looking to extend their network. Don't respond to that email saying, hey, I'll shoot you a LinkedIn invite. No. No. Join a conversation with that person. Start to get to know that person a little bit better. Sanjeev Hans, one of my closest buddies, does this. Is when he starts to make introductions to somebody, he'll schedule the next call, like a month or so away, just to reconnect. How's it? We can keep in touch. We can share ideas. We can share things that are going to help each other. That's how you build your network. Help others as much as they're helping you. That's a real key. Give as much as you get. John Barrett talks about this a lot. What are you giving to your network? Help your network. Like I said, help your network as much as they're helping you. Don't just ask, what can I do to help you? Have that conversation so you know the answer to that, right? Like my friend Boris and I, we just did this today, where I shared a report with him that I thought might be interesting and relevant. It's not to get anything out of it. It's to share and put into it. So Mike Casey mentioned this. Look at your network as if it's gold. You got to polish your gold.
Yeah.
Consistently polish your gold.
All right, excuse me for a minute. I got a big pile of gold over there, and I got to polish it for a second.
Sure.
So, but just practically speaking, how do you know it's enough? Do you just do a little of that every day, or because you could overwhelm yourself with this philosophy and not get any of your KPIs done for your job. Right. So how do you kind of balance that? I'm just kind of curious about that.
So a couple of people, I asked that question of a couple of people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that kind of came up as a consistent theme is give yourself a schedule. And this goes back to that discipline, right? Of having a CRM or a tool to help you monitor your activities.
Yeah.
One of my way back, I don't know if you remember this, Alex, there was an old way back in the day when you had sales tapes and you had Brian Tracy was somebody that
I remember Brian Tracy. I loved him. Yeah.
Yeah. He had a rule called the 5-15-30 rule. And this goes for applying for jobs as well as for networking. And that the first time you talk to somebody, that's day one. Mike Casey brought this up, and I thought it was fascinating. He says, some people send an email back. They say, hey, thanks for meeting with me. It was great talking with you. Mike Casey does this. He writes handwritten thank you notes. Handwritten thank you notes.
Still today.
Going back to the discipline, he has business cards made up. And again, on day one of his search, you have business cards made up. Name, email address, phone number, all that other stuff. He sends handwritten thank you notes with that business card to that individual he talked to. Then it would be 5 days after that, just sending a quick little email note saying, hey, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. And 15 days after that, so day 20. And then 30 days after that, day 50. Now you do this both for networking as well as for your job search. Because you know this as well as I do, Alex, and I'm willing to bet there's lots of CIOs and directors and senior managers listening to this. They may have hired for a role. You're going to know in that first 15 to 30 days if that person you hired is working out or not.
Interesting.
And you know this, Alex, the last thing somebody wants to do is restart a search because something isn't working out. So if you're there on that 30, which is day 50, just shooting them an email saying, hey, I know that you hired someone for this role. I'm wishing you all the best, but I'm just following up on keeping in touch. You'd be surprised how often that turns into a phone call. Whereas if you would have just given up, like with that initial comment, write a rebuttal. Don't just take it laying down. Write a rebuttal. See what happens. By doing that, you'd be surprised what happens. It's not going to work all the time, but all it has to do is work once.
You bring up a really interesting concept, and I'm going to say it this way. Use the opportunity that you have to, while you're looking for jobs, look at it as building your network as much as looking for the job.
Exactly.
And you're saying that, but I just heard it in the way you said, because you described, what was it? The
1, 5, 15, 30. So day one, like Mike Casey does, write handwritten thank you notes. 5 days after that.
Yeah.
Then 15 days after that, which is day 20, then 30 days, which would be day 50.
Yeah, I think the message is if you're consistently doing that with people that you meet, it's an investment. But even if it's people you meet during the interview process, let's say you interview you're interviewing for a director or C-level job, and you're probably going to interview the COO, the CEO,
Right.
and now you're sending them that nice message to him or her, and they're the CXO of a major company. There's going to be other jobs,
Right.
and they're going to be at the club with their buddy, and they're going to say, he's going to say, "Hey, I need a new CIO. You know what? I got this guy that we met that he turned out to be we didn't hire him, but he turned out to be a really great guy. Let me get you his number."
Right.
So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think the way to look at this job search, you kind of like change your headset. Yes, the main KPI is get the job, right? But if you also can come out of it with more relationships, you've really got this window gives you the opportunity to do some networking that you really didn't think you had time for before.
Right.
I like that, Tom. That's kind of the hidden benefit of looking for a job.
You're exactly right. And one of the consistent comments I hear, and this goes to the brand piece that we were talking about before, is that your networking doesn't stop when you get your next job. This is probably the most important thing. When you get your next gig, your networking doesn't stop. It actually continues. You have to continue that, because this has happened more times than I think a lot of people listening to this podcast can count, where all of a sudden you lose touch with somebody, where, you know what, if you would have had just sent a 30-second email to somebody saying, "Hey, it's been a while since we connected. Let's catch up." That leads to a conversation, which leads to another conversation, which leads to another conversation. So it's really, really important as you're building your brand to consistently network after you found your gig. So when you found your next job, your networking doesn't stop. As a matter of fact, it continues. This gives you that opportunity to give back to your network as well, right? Because you get what you give.
Right.
And again, to that same point,
great advice.
If you're going to get that next conversation, that didn't come from a 20-minute phone call. Trust isn't built in 20 minutes. Trust is not built in 20 minutes. And in order for someone to recommend you, I got to trust you.
Yeah. So that's good. That's a good message. So if you're watching this, and even if you're not looking for your job today, wake up and start doing this if you're not already doing it. All right, Tom. So we're on this slide now. You say, know your what and your why. I think everybody can kind of relate to Simon Sinek. We've probably all seen the Know Your Why from Simon, but for purposes of landing your next major role, why don't you describe sort of net for us what you mean by know your what and your why?
So the what is, I want that job as a CIO. The why is because you're a transformational leader and you want to take that company to the next stage, whether it be e-commerce or RPA or AI. So the what is, I want to be a CIO or a CISO. The why is because you want to take that company to the next level.
That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of your example with AI, for example, I want to help. I'm a transformational CIO, which means I transform business processes and I help the company. You mentioned AI. Everybody's hot about AI. I can help the company leverage this technology so it can become much more profitable or add better customer service. Or is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, let's continue with this slide and we'll get your other comments on this slide.
Sure. So I'm going to revert back to my friend Sargon Guliana, the person
Love that.
One of the things that he talks about is that think to yourself, if you are a quote unquote transformational CIO, and you think of yourself as a transformational CIO, what have you done that's been transformational? If it's, well, we implemented Azure. Okay.
That's not transformational.
Right. Like one of the things
it could be.
Yeah, it could be. What did you do with it? Right.
Yeah, that's it.
If you speak in service desk terms, you're not going to be you're not a transformational CIO. You're a utility, and that's okay. But don't picture yourself as a transformational CIO when you talk in service desk terms. Another thing that I kind of found out is really, my friend Rick and I have had this discussion a couple of times. Ask yourself 3 times, why do you want to be a CIO? By asking it three times or more, you're going to find out, okay, do I really want to be a CIO? Or, like to my friend Sargon, maybe it's best for me to start something else, start my own gig. And don't be afraid of that. What I encourage people to do is ask themselves this question. Look at the last 7 or 8 years of your career. There are certain projects, there are roles that you've held, projects that you were very proud of, that you really got a lot out of. Write down what were those things. And then ask yourself, why? Why did I get a lot out of it? So let's say it's ERP implementations. We'll just use that as an example. I got a lot out of ERP implementations. Why? Well, it was good to see a project come to completion. Okay, why? Well, it's good to have, it's good. Well, it's good because I was able to nurture some success in people. Okay, why? Oh, I really like seeing people grow. There you go, bingo. That's your why. That's what you should go after. Maybe you shouldn't be a CIO. Maybe you shouldn't be a CISO. Maybe you should be a project or program manager. Because you figured out, I'm able to really build my team and watch people grow. This is, interestingly enough, this is why you'll see people in their 50s and 60s sometimes become associate professors. Is it because they like seeing students grow? They like seeing people grow. So interestingly enough, I read a couple of people that have said, I'm about ready to retire, but I think I'm going to become an associate professor. And that's where they figure out the what, and their why is because I really like seeing people grow. Same thing go with CISOs. So one of my friends, Michael, he has a book called CISO What? So CI, so what? If you're looking to be a CISO, that's your first book. That's your first book that you should get, because that'll help you determine, okay, can you be a CISO? Do you really want to be one? Right? Because you may read through this and say, I don't want to do that at all.
Yeah,
it's a glorious title, but do I really want to do that?
Yeah. That's good. All right, well, that was a good discussion on know your what and your why. Let's move to the next couple slides. I like this one. Your success in your past was not an accident. So do you see a lot of people who are kind of doubting themselves? And I guess it's kind of normal when you go from, hey, I'm the CXO, all of a sudden I'm not. Go ahead on this slide. That's kind of how I read this. Go ahead.
You're exactly right. So when you lose that job, the job market this year has been tough. I think we have to face facts. This year has been a really tough year. So you start to lose confidence. You start to think, am I the only one having trouble? No, you're not. You're not the only one having trouble. The key here is to remember your past. Your successes in the past were not an accident. You were successful in the past for a reason. And like I said, that wasn't an accident. This goes back to one of our previous points of asking yourself, what were those things that you really got a lot out of in your previous job or the last 6 or 7 years? That success, like building your team or mentoring younger people, that wasn't a mistake. You've got proven track record in terms of how to do that. So realize that, like I said, realize that you've had success in the past, and that's not by mistake. One of the things that came up was, if you've been somewhere for a long time, give yourself time to decompress and realize what successes you've had. So like my friend Rick talks about this a lot.
That's a good one.
Realize what those successes were. Write those down. That'll help you with your brand. That'll help you with your message. Here's what you've done well in the past. So you're exactly right. Sometimes people get into a little bit of doldrums because it's like, this is taking a while. But don't let that define you. Let your past successes define you, and that helps building your brand.
As I listen to you, it's almost like there is going to be some kind of, for some people, it's like you had a relationship with this business,
right?
And now you don't. And you're saying that give yourself the time and the coaching to get through the stages of realizing you no longer have that relationship with that business, but you can still have the relationship with a lot of the people in the business. Oh, so I like this a lot. This is a very positive statement, Tom. I like your car. This is a karma statement for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Think positively about yourself and give yourself the time to recover
Right.
emotionally from this and rebuild your confidence. Now, I didn't hear you say this, but some of the notes that you're saying on the earlier thing, which we didn't talk about, is you said keep yourself busy. I think that kind of ties into this. Like I play a lot of pickleball. You actually had a comment, join a pickleball league, do something. So if you're not searching, keep yourself busy doing something productive, whether it's a hobby or looking for or a league or right.
Right. My
Yeah.
buddy Henrik talks about this a lot, is that um, keep yourself busy, because what ends up happening is as you're busy, you're not constantly desperate, because when you're in the midst of that
Oh,
search and you're spending 8 hours a day responding to jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or trying to network, you have a tendency, your brain you start to get a little bit desperate. And by doing something, join a pickleball club, take your dog for a walk, exercise an hour and a half a day,
uh-huh.
or you listen to a podcast, right?
Listen to me and Tom over and over again.
Right, exactly. You get something positive out of that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be exercise, taking your dog for a walk, pickleball, a hobby. One of my friends started to make wine, and he just gets a lot out of it. But it's something that you see a result from.
That's a great hobby because if the job search takes longer and longer, you can not only make the wine, but drink it. No, I'm kidding everybody.
Yeah,
So you can
exactly.
celebrate when you win. When you get the job, you celebrate. All right, let's
You bring
keep
up a
moving.
fascinating point there too, and
What's
two
that?
things: don't panic, don't
Yeah,
don't don't panic, and don't underestimate yourself. So going back to my friend Sargon,
I like that.
he said, he started his own thing. At first, was it a little bit nerve-wracking? Of course it is. But he said, you know what? The problems that you're solving here, they're just bigger problems. You know how to, you have the acorn. You figured
Yeah.
out this problem before. It's just a bigger problem. Um, it's like when you're, and on the reverse end too. So if you're going from like a $3 billion company to a $300 million company, those are two frameworks, right? Those are two ways to think about it. It's not that you can't do it. It's just that you need to change your mindset, and don't underestimate yourself in saying, okay, can I really be this hands-on if I go from 3 billion to 300 million? Of course you
That's a
can.
good point.
You've done it in the past.
Yeah, good point. All right, we're almost done here. I think you and I added this towards the end because we were just kind of talking about today. Once you get your new role, invest in building your executive brand for the long term. So I'll let you make a comment on this, and then I'm going to add a couple things because this is what we do for people. But go ahead.
Sure. So one of the common themes that I've gotten from the dozen or so CIOs that I talk to is that your search is as much of a search of what your brand is as
Interesting.
it is for your next job. What do you want to do and why? Right? We covered that.
Yeah.
Figure out what you're really good at. Make sure you have that sounding board, somebody that can tell you, you may think you're good at this, but you may not be, right? You may be ready for this kind of job, but you might not be. That effort of talking to your friends and figuring out what you're good at,
Mm-hmm.
what you do differently, and figuring out your brand is just as much a part of your search as your search is.
That's a really good comment. Now, I want to take you to a different stage because this is what we do in our practice here is if you're looking for, if you're listening to this and you're watching it when you get your job, when you get that job, that is often the number one time to say, okay, I know what that's like. I don't want to do that again. Wouldn't it be nice to always have people calling you and saying, hey, when you're ready to take the jump, we're here. That's a much better position to be in than having to go through what you just went through.
Mhm.
And so the people that I often get that join, they just went through this. Maybe they're the new CIO, the new CXO, and they come to us and they say, "How do we enhance our brand? How do I enhance my brand?" And I want to tell you another lesson that I heard from one of our clients, one of our members, our other board of advisor member. He was interviewing for a big time job in another company, and uh, it was between him and another candidate. He lost out to the other candidate because the other candidate had taken the time to build their executive brand and they had a bigger network than he did online. Now, why is that even important? Because the company knew that nowadays it's the old saying, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. And they realized that the C-level job needs to have reach into a lot of different places to get the work done, especially as the companies get bigger and bigger. So, that's something to think about. The other thing to think about is when we coach people is I don't say, hey, let's just recreate your resume. I think you kind of got to mirror that resume. You talked about this before. You got to mirror that resume when you're looking for your job. It's got to be mirrored so that it's consistent. But once you're past that, you're still going to do this, but you can start to be more forward thinking with your executive brand. The executive brand can lead. The executive brand doesn't have to be just what I did, just what I'm good at, but here are the areas and that I want to be involved in, that I'm involved in. And I have a process that I put people through that are in my coaching program, and it makes a big difference for them because now they can start to visualize themselves, Tom, as, hey, I'm not just a role like you mentioned. I'm this type of executive. And I want to make a comment on something you said earlier. When you're talking about the what and the why, the way that I say it with people is if you're internal, think of yourself as an external consultant and what is your practice expertise in? So, for example, I interviewed somebody recently and we found out that she was truly a transformational digital executive. And because we went through, and she had created a framework for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
As she was describing her different jobs, she was also describing the framework. And I said, can you just reiterate that framework for me? So now when she talks about herself in her brand, she talks about herself as I'm an internal transformational executive. And I created this framework for aligning the transformation with the goals of the company, and I get the job done.
Right.
And why? Because I enjoy helping companies transform their business processes to either make more money, have a better customer service, or be more effective or more efficient. And those are the four big things, by the way. Everybody knows that. That's exactly what you were talking about. So that's what our coaching will help you do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. And I know Tom is always about spreading good karma. So I'm going to put that right here on additional tips. I'll give you a moment if you have additional tips, but I want to put in a plug for Tom. Tom is a great guy. Whenever I have somebody come to me and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, can you help? Of course I do. I introduce you to a bunch of people. And one of the people I will introduce you to is Tom, because he's always willing to look at the resume and say, hey, I may not have this job for you, but here's my 2 cents, and call this guy. So any additional tips on this topic, keys to landing your next IT leader job that you want to add before we close out?
A couple of things, and this is actually really important. So if you look at, and this is just additional tips to help people in their search. So I'm more than happy to help you in terms of taking a look at your resume, introducing you to other people I know, because it's going to be that plants that seed. That plants that seed, you water that seed. Sometimes those seeds are dormant, but it doesn't mean you don't continue to water it. Your seeds are your network. I look at them like trees, right? Trees, in order to grow, it starts out as a sprig. It didn't grow to a tree by watering it once,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's probably one of the bigger tips that I have. So if you have, if you're lost, or not really not lost, but if you're thinking to yourself, whew, this has been a really tough year, reach out. I'm happy to help. But one
That's
additional
nice.
side thing to this is that if you look at and this is kind of a juicy tip that I've just been kind of working on for the last couple of weeks. If you look at the jobs numbers and where the job gains are and where the jobs are over the last several months, they're in a few areas: healthcare, hospitality, government, and the logistics and warehousing. Do yourself a favor. Don't assume that all roles are posted on LinkedIn and Indeed, because they're not.
Oh,
Go to your local demographic area. Let's say you're in Naperville or you're in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, right? Google the top 20 or 30 hospitality, healthcare, logistics, and warehousing firms. Look at local government, colleges, universities, state and local government. But Google the top 20 or 30 companies in that healthcare, hospitality, and logistics and warehousing piece of the verticals, and go look at their websites directly. Don't assume that they're posting everything on LinkedIn and Indeed. Everybody on this podcast knows something about this. And that, guess what's happening to your budgets? You're starting to get looked at like a fine-tuned comb. So if you're an HR director, guess what? Your posting budget is probably being decreased by quite a bit. So it's important for job seekers, regardless of whether you're individual.
Oh, that's interesting. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Don't assume that those jobs are on LinkedIn and Indeed. Go directly to the top 20 or top 30 firms in those areas. So it's an interesting tip that might.
That's a good tip.
Really helpful.
Yeah, because there'll be less people applying. Still be a lot of people, but you'll be up against less competition than the ones that are spending the money on those other sources.
Right.
All right. What's your next tip? Any more?
Don't chase a title. Chase responsibilities. Chase growth. And you know this as we went through what we did before, right? Mm-hmm. Figure out your why. If your why is, I really like seeing companies grow, well, maybe that's not a C-level title. Maybe that's a program manager role. Maybe that's a senior project manager role. So don't chase titles, because one of the things that you mentioned is this concept that one of my buddies said, in the pyramid, there's one brick at the top of the pyramid. so if you're chasing the top of the pyramid, there's one brick there. Just keep that in mind. So, chase titles. Don't chase titles. Chase responsibilities.
That's good.
Don't be afraid if things start to not work, because you're gonna pivot, just like a marketer does, just like a salesperson does. If you send out 1,000 emails a week and it's not working, maybe it's time for you to reflect a little bit back and have that buddy tell you, hey, you know why you're not getting responses? Because of this and this and this. So that's the importance of building your network, and quite frankly, having a friend.
All right. Well, this has been an awesome segment, as I predicted. I knew you would come through with the good stuff, and I'm sure that you'll have helped a lot of people. And I want to remind everybody, this is Tom Welke, partner at RSM Solutions, that we're talking to, that we've spoken to. Tom, before I close it out, I just want to thank you for taking the time to not only do today's segment, but also you interviewed, I think, about 10 to 12 executives in preparation. So this is not just Tom pulling a rabbit out of the hat and say, here's my thoughts. Some of it is, and it's well treaded because he's been doing this for a while. But the fact that you took the time to go out and interview these executives who had just been through it, I think you really gave people some good information today.
Thanks a lot, Alex. I appreciate this.
And we're happy to have you involved for exactly this reason. All right, so that was another great segment. Thanks again to Tom. Watch all of our videos at technologyexecutivesclub.com, and don't forget to look for our new YouTube channel. It's under the name of Technology Executives Review. And you can listen to our podcast under that same name, Technology Executives Review, under Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to join our newsletter. We call it the Insiders Club. It may just say newsletter by the time you get to our website. And if you want to be involved and be a regular on our media network, just like Tom is, reach out and ask us about our Board of Advisors program. The Board of Advisors is actually the Board of Advisors to the community. I want you to think of it as HGTV for technology leaders. And it's a great way to help others while you expand your executive brand and build your network, so you can enhance and accelerate your career, just what we've been talking about, get more clients, and or build your business if you're on the provider side or you're a consultant. Book a discovery call about the program on our site. Thank you for attending. Tom, thanks again. It's our honor to serve you and your team, everybody. Special happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Tom, happy Thanksgiving to you.
And right back at you.
I appreciate you. And don't forget, everybody, to visit us at technologyexecutivesclub.com.